listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.
Hello everyone and welcome to
You're listening
the Cricket Podcast, and I've just messed up the beginning of another live show. We've got about a 50% ratio of getting them right at the moment, which isn't too bad, is it, to be honest? We're talking about 3 IPL matches today. In reverse order, we're going to do Chennai Super Kings v Kolkata Knight Riders. The thriller that nearly was one of the greatest games in IPL history, let's say, but was just very good in the end. Then we've got 2 slightly less good games, only slightly less good. Punjab Kings versus Sunrisers Hyderabad, and yesterday's match between Mumbai Indians and Delhi Capitals. I'm Jack Hope. I'm here with Max Rowe Brown. How are you doing, Max Rowe Brown?
Hi, Jack. I've just calmed down. Just the pulse has just settled back to its close to its resting rate. It was a thriller of a game that we just witnessed.
And Ross Legg. How are you doing, Ross Legg?
Well, I'm not going to let Max get away with not standing up and giving us a model of his shirt.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's going to go down well on the podcast.
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right, and I'm buzzing for this. This is the best part of my day. So let's do this.
Your day must have been terrible. Do you want to give our listeners a few messages before we kick off with things?
Yes, you should. Yep, you should like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and share it with your friends. We want to grow. We want more questions from you guys. That's what we want to do. We are sponsored by Woodstock Cricket, and you can use the code, was it T25 on their website? But we're sorting that out to make sure you get...
P25.
Well, whatever it is, it's going to be in the show notes, so you can have a look there. We'll post it up on our Twitter when it gets sorted. But if you want your cricket kit, go to them.
That's good advice. And if you'd like to give to the show directly, you can do that by becoming a YouTube member or via our Patreon. And there are a couple of things you can earn and all of that. Max, let's start with today's big match. How good was it? CSK v KKR. Talk us through. Little summary, please.
Sure. So today we saw a surprisingly effective CSK team taking on a pretty and typically inconsistent KKR on a deck that would perhaps surprise even the most ardent of flat earthers, because it was just... It was ridiculous, and as you might expect, it was an absolute run fest. CSK got off to a pretty decent start with Faf du Plessis and a rejuvenated Ruturaj Gaikwad, buoyed by his recent vote of confidence from Stephen Fleming. Both finding the boundary quite regularly with some ease, and while the spinners Narayan and Chakravarti did actually manage to exert a bit of control on proceedings, the seamers on the other hand were being flayed to all parts at over 10 and over. And when Gaikwad went, Moeen kept things going, and followed by Dhoni and Jadeja, providing the perfect finish to reach 223, which seemed a pretty tall order. That tall order looked even taller, sort of Everest height perhaps, when KKR got off to the worst start they could possibly have imagined, and rapidly fell via some terrible shots to 34 for 5, at which point it looked game over. Enter Dre Russ and Dinesh Karthik, and when they were at the crease, KKR came fighting back. The two of them launched a carpet bomb campaign with high-velocity missiles raining around the Wankhede, and CSK fielders falling over chairs and sort of just diving around to get out of the way by the looks of things. And Andre Russell seemed intent on breaking the sound barrier at one point, but sadly all good things must come to an end, and after he raced to 50, he inexplicably left a straight ball from Sam Curran, who makes things happen, and bowled him behind his legs, leaving Dinesh Karthik and Pat Cummins to take up the mantle for the rest of an unlikely chase. But Sam Curran made things happen for CSK, and then he made things happen for KKR by getting pummeled for 30. And we all thought that actually Pat Cummins might do the unthinkable and score the last 60 runs on his own. But Unfortunately, he ran out of people at the other end who could run, and and they came agonisingly short in the final over. And another win for CSK. Come on.
Right, Max. In a match which literally had everything, where do you think the best place to start as a discussion point would be?
I actually have absolutely no idea. Why don't we start chronologically and talk about Gaikwad and his turnaround in form?
That sounds good. He had been struggling. I 100% expected Robin Utapa to be playing today. In my mind, the decision was already made.
So I have a theory about this and CSK's recruitment, and perhaps it's actually a bit of genius. What they've done is they've picked up Pujara and they've got Utapa, and maybe they think, you know what, we really trust Gaikwad and we don't want to be tempted into making changes when he's not performing. So if we pick up two players that we really don't want to open with instead, we have no choice but to stick with him until he comes good.
A fail-safe to youth policy. I like that.
Yeah, that's clever. Like, they gave themselves a bit of stick, basically, to stick with Gaikwad. He was pretty good. He has been criticised on this podcast and elsewhere for a pretty low boundary percentage, not being quite aggressive enough in the power play, but that wasn't the player we saw today. So you have to say hats off to him there. I think pretty helped at the other end. He had Faf du Plessis taking a bit of pressure off. That was also a decent innings, I thought. I mean, I've got down here that it probably wasn't as good as 95 sounds, but it was a decent innings.
What do you mean?
Ross. Well, okay, so in a match where both teams have scored 200, or almost 200. In fact, no, both teams did score 200. If you score 95 off 61 of the balls, then you aren't scoring at the rate of the match, are you? You're using up a lot of resources for less value than you could be generating. And if you bat the whole way through, you've seen more balls. So you actually, near the end, should be able to hit more runs and like escalate that strike rate into the stratosphere. He's finished with a strike rate of 150. It's pretty good, but he didn't bat KKR out of sight. So I think decent innings... And decent innings is good, isn't it? Like, if you have a decent knock, everyone pats you on the back and buys you a beer. But I don't think it was extremely good, is what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I think it was a pretty good innings actually, and I think I think you underestimate how good Faf du Plessis is, and you also have to take into consideration how old Faf is. When he's past 30 balls, anything else is a bonus, mate. He's knackered after that point. I think it was a great performance from CSK, and regardless if we think they should have hit more runs, they won by 18 in the end, and the MS Dhoni train kind of carries on.
I mean, it does. Max, in terms of CSK batting, as the CSK superfan, who else were you impressed with? Because it was a pretty good team performance again.
Yeah, I was impressed with the fact that they all did what they what they needed to do, in effect. In that Faf and Gaikwad got CSK off to a good start, and then you needed everyone to come in and start attacking from the first ball, and they did that. Moeen Ali showed again how versatile he is in T20, being able to take up the role of first drop early on and build an innings, and also come in and play number 3 when your first wicket falls after the 13th over or whatever it was, and keep the scoring rate up. So that was good. And also, we should mention that Dhoni decided that he was the right man to come in and do that role as well, and he did actually manage to deliberately hit the ball for 6 at one point. And what did he score? 17, and the margin of victory was 18. So a very important innings from the captain.
So once again, Dhoni is the difference between the sides. I think looking at the scorecard, Ravindra Jadeja. 6 runs off one ball. That is the perfect innings. That's what we should all aspire to be. On the bowling side, it was carnage.
There's been a hell of a lot of chat in the live chat about how much Pat Cummins has gone around the park here.
Pat Cummins figures 4 overs, no maidens, no wickets, 58 runs. That is one of the all-time batterings.
He finished net positive though, didn't he?
Did he? Did he finish net positive? I mean, if you're rolling the team, I mean, I know what you mean. I do understand what you mean.
He's 8 runs up.
But if your role in the team is to prevent the other team getting 220, this is a big negative. What's up with Cummins? Is he just not a good T20 bowler, do you reckon, Ross?
You remember what happened when Steve Smith first started playing Test cricket? He actually turned up as a leg spinner, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I think this is what's actually happening with Pat Cummins. He's actually not that good of a bowler anymore, and he's going to become a batsman, and that's going to be the thing that actually happens. It's interesting, right? They spent $1.7 million on Pat Cummins last year.
Something like that. It was a lot of money. Yeah.
It was the most expensive cricketer, wasn't he, from the IPL history at one point. And there is just a bit where people like pace coming onto the ball. It was an absolute deck, as you say. And actually, when you're so adept at hitting the ball in the way in which these elite level cricketers are, actually they're not really fazed by Pat Cummins bowling at kind of 86 miles an hour, 87 miles an hour. It comes onto the bat a little bit sweetly, and they can trust where it's going. I think he was just a bit too predictable. And unfortunately, for him, went absolutely round the park, which is always great to see an Aussie do that. So.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his career stats. Career average in the IPL, 32 with an economy rate over 8. That isn't too special, is it, Max?
No, it's not, and I think Ross has probably touched on what the issue is really, in that it's the kinds of the sorts of change ups and the length that he bowls. He is able to bowl change ups. We've seen him bowl very good off cutters and slow balls and things like that. But I don't know whether it's a game sense thing or what. But he does seem to just like to throw it up there as fast as he can at times, and on a day like today, that is absolutely not the right thing to do.
We also saw Sunil Narine back in action. It's good to see that he's added the front foot no ball to his repertoire of illegal deliveries, isn't it? Ross, I know you're not a big buyer of Sunil Narine these days. He went for less than 10 and over?
Yeah, I got a wicket as well. So yeah, fair enough. There's just that bit. Some people in T20 in cricket in general get that one season too many, and I think Sunil Narine is in that basket at the moment.
Fair enough. Before we move on to talking about CSK's bowling innings and KKR batting, let's quickly talk about how the wheels completely came off for Kolkata, shall we? So, last 6 overs. Do you know off the top of your head how many runs they conceded?
Off the last 6, I think it was
91.
91. Oh my god.
Runs. How much of this, Max, do you reckon was bad bowling? How much of it was bad captaincy? How much of it was good batting? If you were going to apportion some blame here, like we love to do on the cricket podcast.
I think it's difficult to blame the captain when the ball is disappearing over the fielders on the boundary. It sort of doesn't really matter where you put people, does it, when the ball's disappearing into the stands? I think you have to say that maybe it was a case of the bowlers just not really getting it right. You know, it's difficult on that pitch to keep the runs down, as we saw, but most of those big boundaries that we saw today were from length deliveries that were normal pace, and they just, I don't think there were enough. It was probably one of those days where actually you need to go back to the Yorker. A lot of people don't like the Yorker anymore because obviously the margin of error is so high, and on a lot of other grounds that we've seen, the cutters and slower balls tend to be more effective because they stick in the pitch. But today, I think actually the Yorker was probably the way to go, and we maybe didn't see enough of that.
Well, I thought it was interesting, their approach, because in the first couple of games, they were playing at a different venue, but they were looking to bowl spin as much as possible in the power play, and they opened with Chakravarti, but then went with Cummins, and there was a bit for me where, I mean, you can see by the stats, the spinners were going for less, and actually it was quite a change up from Owen Morgan and KKR. So it's quite interesting to see they're trying to play that horses for courses kind of thing here, and it's fired on them.
Big time. Big time. You know what else backfired on them? Their whole top five. Max, what the hell were they doing in this scenario? Was this just blind panic?
I think it genuinely. I was going to say. I think they kind of lost their heads a bit, didn't they? They saw the total. They probably didn't really give themselves time to think. Actually, this is a really good pitch, and we're well in the game here if we just get a decent power play going. And they just I don't know. Yeah, they just lost their heads. But I mean, the shots that they got out to were pretty poor, weren't they? I mean, there was Rana's shot where he got caught by Dhoni flicking it was a regulation leg stump full ball that should have disappeared, and he just hit it as high in the air as he possibly could. I think was it Narain who tried to cut something that was on leg stump. I mean, the thinking was muddled and the shots were bad. Deepak Chahar's done it again, doesn't he? 4 wickets in the power play. He's a
master.
He's electric this year.
I mean, he is. I think he's bowled the most overs in IPL history in the power play. So he's got a speciality. He's basically made a career out of this. So we shouldn't be, completely blown away. No. Yeah, but possibly the difference again. Also, we thought because right at the end of the power play, Andre Russell came to the crease. And he looked angry. He hit two of his first 4 balls for boundaries. It's kind of hard to describe Andre Russell in full flow, because it's not necessarily beautiful, but boy, is it scary, and it's pretty effective as well, isn't it, Ross?
Me being one of the best amateur bowlers known to man, I would be scared to scared to be around Andre Russell when he's in that kind of mood. I mean, he just has that ability just to absolutely destroy a human being. Like the abuse that he gave to just the destructive nature of it, and just to be like, surely. When you take a penalty in football and you miss a penalty, you kind of want the ground to swallow you up. But there's a bit there where when you're a bowler and your first ball gets launched for 6, kind of weird. You got 5 more things that you've got to go and suffer at the hands of this monster. It's a pretty intimidating thing when he's on form. And again, we talked last IPL about how they actually use Andre Russell. And actually, is he a bit too lower down in that order? And should there be a bit more firepower in that top order when there's chases like this? I don't know.
Well, he was in early enough today, wasn't he? Yeah. Let's be honest. I do. It was good to see him back performing. Unfortunately, we sort of are going to have to talk about him being out, because it genuinely looked like they were going to. I mean, Max, when they were 5 down, you and I were messaging each other in the TCP WhatsApp group, and you were saying, you asked, is it ridiculous that I don't think this game is over yet? And then, that was about 3 balls into Andre Russell's innings.
I think, what was it, about, like 50 for 5 or something around that?
Yeah. Second fastest 50 of the IPL this year. And he'd taken the chances up to 25%, apparently, according to WinViz, which was pretty astonishing, considering they were 33 for 5, chasing 220 to win. But it all did come to an end thanks to Tom Curran. I think Tom Curran came on and bowled an over later. But Sam Curran, why did he do that? He ruined the game for us, didn't he? Really?
I still to this moment don't know what happened. I mean, I assume he thought it was going to be a wide and tried to get his pads out the way so that it didn't flick his pads, so he didn't get the wide. What I don't understand is why he didn't do what he'd done to every other half-tracked leg side delivery up to that point and smack it for 6 as far as he possibly could. It was bizarre.
Yes, it was really bizarre, because it was exactly the same area that Cummins hit 2 huge 6s off Curran a little bit later on in the game. Anyway, he was out, and then he did something sort of unusual, didn't he, Ross? He sat up on the steps and in pads with his bat and gloves and helmet behind him. Yeah, didn't get changed, just sat there looking pensive for most of the rest of the innings. Why did he do that?
So Vic London's highlighted it in one of the super chats and saying that Sam Curran actually gave him a bit of like the small man syndrome that Sam Curran will definitely have and his brother will definitely have. I reckon it was kind of a ploy. It was just like, we've got him out, but actually I'm going to sit on the sideline and still try and intimidate kind of CSK here and see what I can do and try to telepathically be Andre Muscle in that kind of in that thing. So yeah, it's a pretty strange behaviour, but
see, I think here's my theory on this. I think that he knew that in that innings he was playing about as well as anyone could play, like the game of cricket. I don't know. He had taken. Well, I mean, he is one of those people that can transcend the sort of sport in a sense and take it to another plane. And I think he knew as well that if he carried on playing the shots he was playing against the bowlers he was facing on the pitch that he was playing on, KKR were going to win this. And so my theory is that he was basically sitting there upset with himself that he had, in his mind, blown the opportunity to play maybe the greatest innings of his entire career. Like, if you think about it, that kind of position and that kind of performance is why a lot of these players, what motivates a lot of these players. That's why they turn up at nets and hit thousands of balls. It's why they, hit the gym and turn themselves into Andre Muscle. And he had got himself. He'd started. He'd got the start. He was batting well with Dinesh Karthik, who was looking good. CSK at this point were basically in disarray. They didn't know where to bowl to him. And then he got out, and he got out in a way that was incredibly soft. To like a slot ball on leg stump, one that he could have hit. I mean, he could have probably broken the airspeed record with a cricket ball had he played a shot to that. So I think it was just like straight up,
Well, do you remember when we used to play cricket, kind of when you play amateur cricket, and I'm not comparing the two there, but when somebody gets out and then gets so angry at themselves, they walk around the other side of the pitch and just sit by themselves, and it's like that self-hatred. But I can completely buy into what you're talking about there, Jack. I'm loving that theory.
That seems like the logical theory, but I actually have a different thought about it. Have you ever played the PlayStation game Abe's Odyssey?
I have, yep.
Yeah, so the character, obviously, his special power is that he can take control of his enemies and mind control them. And I believe what's happened is that Andre Russell has got so angry at being out, he's actually gone to sit there and take control of Sam Curran's body through his mind, so that when he comes back to bowl out next over, he dishes up a bunch of pies to Pat Cummins, and he can vicariously live the over that he wished he had had against Sam Curran. And as we all know, when you're trying to take control of someone's brain, it requires intense concentration, and you have to sit there staring avidly at the subject. And I believe that is most likely reason for what we saw.
Well, they're all theories. Let us know what you think is what was going through Andre Russell's head. Was it mind control? Was he a bit upset, or did he realise he'd blown his shot at greatness? At that point, I did think it was game over. I thought it was game over at 33 for 5. I probably thought it was game over at 219 in the first innings. When Andre Russell was out, though, I was like, I'm 90% sure this is the actual game over moment. But it didn't exactly turn out that way, did it, Max? You've talked about Pat Cummins and the treatment he gave Sam Curran, but let's go into a little bit more detail. Mm-hmm. What the hell? What the hell was Sam Curran doing?
Yeah, well, I think what had happened is that CSK had exactly the same thought as you, Jack, and that they thought on multiple occasions they'd thought this game was over after they'd taken the last over for, what was it, 19-20 off the last over of their innings. They probably thought that was like the clincher. At 33 for 5, they probably thought, well, this is in the bag, and you could sort of see that in some of the bowling that they dished up to Andre Russell. And then once they got a bit scared again and got Andre Russell out, they probably once again sat back into the thought of, okay, this is dead now, and just sort of forgot that they actually did need to close out the game. and gave Pat Cummins a perfect opportunity to smash his way up to what was it, the third quickest 50 in the IPL this year, because there was just a lot of, I mean, Sam Curran, that over he bowled to Pat Cummins that went for 30. He just bowled it in the same place 5 times in a row.
Yeah, and didn't try and do anything. Didn't come over the wicket. It was brainless cricket. Really brainless cricket. Because it was clear, Pat Cummins has got a hitting game. Like he's not a mug.
No.
He's not a mug with the bat. But he is still, Pat Cummins. This isn't Andre Russell and Pat Cummins are very different beasts. If Andre Russell fancies it, like he's going to take a bowler for 30 at some point in the next 2 years. You can pretty much guarantee, or something like that's going to happen. Pat Cummins isn't in that bracket, so you really sort of do have to feed him balls in his swing arc. He doesn't have the versatile enough game to plunder 20s on the reg. Otherwise, I
think Ayush has put a good stat in the old live chat, saying that Cummins is now the fourth player in IPL history to have 230 scores in an over. So
maybe that's it. Maybe it's feast or famine for the cum dog. That got CSK back in the game, or KKR back in the game. It came down to the last few overs. Let's rattle through the end of this. We've been talking about this game for a while now. What was all that running about? Because this has come up in 2 of our Twitter questions. We've had one from Rick and one from Udit. They want to know why are the guys running with Cummins not sort of vaguely aware of their role in that situation, Max?
I absolutely have no idea what Prashi Krishna was doing in that last over. It was beyond belief. I mean, it was a good move earlier on from Dhoni to move to get Gautam out of the way of where the ball was going, because he looks like the worst subfielder in the history of cricket. What did he do the other day? He came on and dropped the ball for 6, and today he just picked one up and threw it over the boundary for 4. That was good. So yeah, getting Jadeja in the right place and where he wanted to be. Probably should have done that a bit sooner. And that kind of put the pressure on the running, and made it a little bit more relevant. I think Chakravarti sort of got the idea in the end. I mean, he kind of didn't want to go for that run, but realised once he was called through that was what he needed to do. I don't think he would have made it anyway, so it didn't matter. But yeah, Prashi Krishna, I honestly don't. Surely someone would have told him before he went out that your job here is to try and get to the other end. Like they said on the commentary, he didn't even try and steal a yard at the non-strikers end, which I mean,
it would have been embarrassing to get
man-cadded. You would just man-cad them at that point. So I don't know why they were saying that, but it is a good point that he didn't set off quickly, did he? He just sort of he trotted down and then stuttered as if oh, do we actually want these runs? You need 20 off the last over. Of course you need the runs. Just go, just run. Your job is to sprint as fast as you can, 20 yards, and then do it again.
So Max, from Swadin on the live chat, he says, who was worse, Varun or Krishna?
Krishna, because I mean, Chakravarti, he didn't quite get the idea when he was out there, but ultimately it didn't. I don't think it cost them anything when.
Maybe they just wanted to back their ability. They were get me down the striker's end.
When he was run out, he stuttered, but there was never 2 there in a million. He could have, he could have set off yesterday and he wouldn't have made it. So I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not so bothered about that. It's Prashi Krishna where you can genuinely see that the stutter has cost them in the first ball of the over.
Right, so that was the end of that game. Ross, we'll do anything we've got through in the chat in a second, but Rick and Trueback, Ashwin, etc. on Twitter, I think we've got to all of your questions. We've managed to weave them in very nicely, but thank you for sending them over. Ross, anything on the chat before we move on to the other 2 games?
There sure is. From Aswad Chowdhury, that match was really good. Pat Cummins, imagine if he bats like that more often. Proud KKR fan accepting our top order collapse. If you go to the top order collapse a little bit, Garib, Ritesh, Ayush, Naveeth, Shashank, I mean, nearly everybody in there has said, what is going on with Owen Morgan? And actually, we've talked a lot about MS Dhoni retiring, but Dhoni's winning. Morgan is not winning. Morgan is what, he's embarrassing himself a little bit at the IPL stage?
He's to be honest, and we may have talked about this last season. So we've definitely talked about on this podcast that we're not like Morgan super fans when it comes to captaincy, and particularly we've talked about the distinction between strategic and tactical captaincy. In that, if you want a captain to build a big picture for your team and be there over 5 years, develop a team culture and have a direction to take your team, then he's probably a pretty good guy to do that. He's done that really well with England, providing sort of a template for the white ball teams to play in, and then building an environment where players who previously maybe looked a bit average were able to go out and express themselves. The other side of that is tactical captaincy, and that's deciding who bowls when and where the fielders stand. And I think at that level, we've been pretty critical of Morgan. I don't think his cricketing mind, as it were, is in the top tier. I mean, I also don't think, to be honest, that captains make that much difference in a game of cricket. I think a lot of it, as long as they don't blow it too badly, they can get away with. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Morgan's necessarily does anything that is particularly bright. The bat is the problem for him, though, isn't it? If we're being honest, and it has been in the IPL historically as well. He's not really ever had a good IPL. I don't know whether that's because of the pitches. Don't know whether that's because the competition level's higher than it is in bilateral series, which is where he plays most of his games for England. But he's going to have to do something at some point. Otherwise, it's bye-bye Morgan, isn't it, Max?
Well, Max, before you go, Vic London said there's a Morgan effigy burning at his house after the podcast. So
get round and see that. I think. Well, on your point about what it is about Morgan, I think it's probably worth highlighting that his best IPL came last year when they weren't playing in India. So there might be something in that. Yeah, I mean, it's a big concern, especially when the man who he replaced as captain has suddenly looked like he's hit a bit of form with the bat as well. Ultimately, the leadership team make their own decisions. I don't know whether the captaincy has affected him. Maybe it's the extra pressure, but yeah, I would be worried if I were Owen Morgan about how I'm playing.
Okay. Well, that wraps up all of the live chats, other than from Vibhor, who says, sending his hard-earned tech scam money, spend it in good health and stop with the bad predictions. CSK for champions. CSK
why would you stop with the bad predictions? That's 80% of this channel's growth is around the 4-1.
Embarrassing ourselves.
T20 prediction, isn't it?
That was just you.
Yeah, well, look what happened. Shock, hope. Bringing home the listeners. Let's move on to this morning's game, and I don't think we really need to spend too long on this because it was rubbish. I mean, I'm actually really glad that there are two other matches for us to talk about today, so that we don't have to do a whole show on the garbage that these two bottom feeders of franchises managed to serve up for us. I haven't really got a summary, more a list of things that I didn't like.
Nice.
First of all, they played on a pitch which looked like it had been ploughed. It wasn't even like the normal Chennai rubbish. And I'll be honest, I absolutely hate watching cricket matches at the Chippewa Stadium. I'm not really a lover of low-scoring T20s. I think 150. There should be the minimum score in a T20. If I was a dictator, it'd be 150 is where we start the game. If you go below that, everyone goes in the sea, which conveniently at Chennai is quite close by. Second, Punjab Kings probably picked the worst team that they could possibly have picked, I think. Within reason. I mean, they could have just picked all of the people nobody's ever heard of. But they managed to... I'm not even going to go into it.
Well, let's do it. They left two of their most expensive ever players on the bench. And it's not even like two of their best bowlers. Regardless of how they've been performing, they are better bowlers. They picked Moises Henriquez, for goodness sake. The guy is stealing a living.
I've got some more stats on this. Yeah, the team section was awful. And then the way they backed that up with the bat was like diabolical. I mean, you only need to get about 135 to be competitive. And they can't even do that. They're a circus. They're a circus, boys. They managed to lose this match against SRH, who, you know, have plumbed new depths themselves in this tournament. It's in the battle of the. I don't want to say the word. You're not really allowed to use the word anymore. But there's a derogatory word, and that's what's in my mind. And in that battle, to lose so comfortably is truly astonishing. I don't want to ask too many questions about this, but unfortunately our dumbasses run a cricket podcast, so we have to, and we've committed to covering the IPL. Ross, do you think this was the worst planned and worst executed performance in the history of cricket? Or do you think it's only in the top 5?
I mean, it's a pretty good one. I mean, England over the years have definitely picked the wrong team on a couple of occasions. I think today it was really interesting because Sunrisers Hyderabad only picked three genuine batsmen. So all Punjab had to do was get out 2 of those, and they probably would have won the game. Their tail started at 4, regardless of what you said. They dropped Samad, which is crazy.
He was injured.
Okay, that's still crazy. I'd play an injured Samad over Vijay Shankar. I'll tell you that for free. When it comes to their approach, why would you not pick Jai Richardson? Like Riley Meredith, I can understand being taken out of the firing line and Chris Jordan maybe coming in for that game. But I really, really don't understand why you'd pick Moises Henriquez to come into that place. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And here
are some better options, I think. So these are, you can see what they were trying to do. They were trying to pick a team that had a bunch of spinners in, so that on the cow field that they're playing on, they'd be able to, you know, spin a web and keep SRH to a really low score, or, you know, get a medium score and defend it. The problem, one of the main problems I've got with this plan is that the spinners they picked are diabolical in comparison with some of their better players. So they had to bowl 4 overs of Deepak Hooda, career economy 8, average 51. I mean, that's not. It doesn't matter how helpful the conditions are. You're just not giving yourself a chance there. Moises Henriquez, career economy over 8, average 32. Fabian Allen, he's never played in the IPL, completely unknown quantity there. Murugan Ashwin, his economy just under 8. He's not too bad, average of 33. They have Ravi Bishnoi on the bench, who took loads of wickets from last year. They have Ishan Perel on the bench, who averages 16 in the Syed Mushtaq Ali Trophy. And they could even, I mean, instead of Moises Henriquez, they could have played David Malan, who registered for the IPL auction as an all-rounder and bowls leg spin regularly in T20 cricket. Like really regularly. They had all of these better options, and instead they've gone for, like, you know, the worst. What do they do? Pick these guys out of a hat?
Have you ever played 52 card pickup, where you get a pack of cards, just drop it on the floor? That seems see what happened. That genuinely feels like their approach today. It's not a good look for them, especially with the players they have at their disposal. And we said it was going to take a bit of time for them to gel. But if you're trying to get a team to gel, you don't just pick all the fringe players who you've bought as a joke at the auction and go, here you go, come and play. They said it was absolutely mad what their approach was, and they couldn't have had a better team to play against. Sunrisers Hyderabad, rock bottom of the table.
Yeah, look, I can't explain any more about that.
With the players they picked as well, they even managed to get that wrong and sent Shah Rukh Khan in after Moises Henriquez.
Yeah.
Who's the one guy who's been actually playing pretty
I just can't believe Moises Henriquez is in anyone's team. I can't believe
I watched him. I watched him in the Blast at Surrey a few years ago, and and he was so average. Like, just so unbelievably average. I don't know what they were thinking.
Let's talk about.
I was going to say, yeah, go on.
SRH.
Yeah.
Is that what you were going to say, Ross? I hope so.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Good. Because, it was a total gift for them. And you can only beat the teams that are in front of you. But they did win comfortably. Probably the big news is that they've broken glass in case of emergency, and Kane Williamson is back in the side, which we kind of suspected might happen at some point based on how they were going. Kane Williamson, is he the saviour, Ross?
I like having Kane Williamson in the side. I think we've talked about their structural issues. I don't think they picked their best side they had available to them today, but they have won. If they were playing anybody else, I think they would have lost, that's just the crux of the matter. David Warner and Johnny Bairstow is the best opening partnership they're going to possibly have. Having Kane Williamson at 3, that is a pretty solid top order, but it does mean that the rest of their lineup is relatively weak. It's going to be difficult, I think, if one of them might have to drop out. And not having Holder, not having Naby, that they might just struggle to find the rest of the overs moving forward. But today it worked. So
I think we've seen enough of their local talent with the bat. I reckon they've got a better chance of making the playoffs from this point if they just hope that Williamson, Warner, and Bairstow all have pretty good IPLs, and they can, because look, Sunrisers, they do have a good bowling attack, and they've got some good local bowlers. I think that'll become slightly more obvious when they don't have to play in a sewer every game, but they, that's just how the schedule is, isn't it? But I do think Natarajan and I think Bhuvneshwar Kumar on wickets where you can bowl quickly are really good options, and obviously Rashid Khan's great. I think you don't need that many runs to give them a chance. And whilst Warner, Bairstow, and Williamson, by themselves, probably none of them are Andre Russell or something, but they are all pretty consistent performers. And actually, Warner and Bairstow have got pretty good shouts at this point to take home the orange cap, as we sort of predicted before the tournament. Let's finish on Bairstow on this, and we'll see if there are any quick questions, maybe one quick question or something. Don't want to talk about it for much longer. Bairstow, how impressive has he been this IPL? How out of 10, how's his tournament going so far?
Well, Max, you take that one.
I would give him a strong 8. He's been far and above the best of the SRH batting lineup so far. Don't recall him failing. I think he'll just be really frustrated that he hasn't managed to kick on, because basically, as we've kind of alluded to with the rest of their batting lineup, if they were going to win a game, they needed Johnny Bairstow to basically be there at the end, or take it down to them needing 20 or 40. Otherwise, it all collapses, and that's what we've seen. So today, you saw that. You saw the fact that he knew that today, and he was super, super careful just to make sure that they got the points. And it almost got to a point, actually, where we were like, could they still blow it? Needing one a ball for the last 3 overs, could they still blow it? But no, a timely 6 from him, and I think he was good today in that he basically took on responsibility of what he knew the SRH needed to do to get the points. So it was a mature innings from him.
Ross, any questions on this game?
Yeah, so Ravi's come in and said, Ross, you have to talk about Kedar Yadav being in the side. And there's been a couple of people like Path talking about Manish Pandey is the best fielder in Sunrisers Hyderabad. Great utilisation at 12th man. I mean, Pandey's hit some runs. Pandey's cost him a couple of games already with his own KL Rahul style approach to batting. I do think that Pandey is better than Yadav, though. I'm not sure Yadav should be in the side. Jack, what do you think on that front? Much of a muchness?
Yeah, I don't really care. I have to be honest. Sometimes, I know it's our job to pass judgment, but sometimes I just can't summon the will.
Well, there were 3 guys in there that were basically just thanks for coming, weren't they? So Pandey would only have been one of those.
Yeah, I can see a few people disagreeing with me in the chat. Darshan sent us a super chat pointing out that Hayden, Hussey, McCullum, Watson, Dhoni, Rayner and Morkel will have great records on that Chennai pitch. Yeah, look, they do. I don't like it, and it's perfectly acceptable for me not to like it and other people to like it. It's not the type of cricket, or it's not the type of T20 cricket I love watching. And I think it's probably, a particularly abysmal venue if you like, high scoring T20 matches when they play consecutive matches.
Yeah, so it's quite poignant this year because there's so many in such a short space of time that both makes it more obvious compared to the games like we saw at Mumbai, but also makes it harder to get the pitch to a standard that maybe you could score 160 on, because with repeated games and it always being uncovered, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Ross Legg, would you like to move us on to the third and final match that we'll be talking about today?
Yep. So yesterday, last year's winners and runners-up faced off against one another. That's the English I was looking for in Chennai. Mumbai Indians last year had the wood over Delhi, but this time they were out-strategized and outplayed. 85-year-old Amit Mishra dazzled and ripped out the heart of the Indians as Ishan Kishan and Jayant Yadav nurdled them to a almost competitive total. Delhi, in reply, they were calm, they were collected. The informed Dhawan kind of battled away with Steve Smith, and then Lalit Yadav before Hetmeyer saw them home with just about an over to spare. I think it was a pretty big deal for Delhi Capitals as they vanquished someone who, as I said, had the wood over them. Whereas Mumbai Indians, I don't actually think will be that concerned at the loss. Jack, I see you've put on your very fashionable Mumbai Indians top. That is really quite. I like the zip. The zips are nice.
Yeah, it's. I can.
That's just in case. That's just in case the match is getting a bit too much, isn't it? But so let's start here with what can only be described as a genius move by Rishabh Pant to open with Stoinis. Who saw that coming?
I think you can see that coming. He's done it in the Big Bash quite a few times. It's in his skill set to open the batting, and arguably, and we've talked about this before as well. Arguably, he would be better utilised at the top of the order because he doesn't often hit a particularly high strike rate. He might have a decent strike rate overall, but he's not the sort of guy who can come in at 5, or 4 even, like AB de Villiers, let's say. Go hard from ball 1 and score, say, 60 off 30 balls near the end of the innings. That's not really
Ross,
his skill
when do we
set.
break it to Jack that we're talking about the bowling?
Probably in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. In my mind.
I'm going to go in. I'm going to justify this point about Stoinis opening the batting.
Didn't even
Yeah, I don't know.
Prithvi
I was thinking
Shaw
back
and
to the
Dhawan
game.
are just like, what am I doing?
I was thinking back to the game, and I was wondering, why has he started with the second innings? And I don't even remember Stoinis opening the batting.
He was bowling his medium dibbly dobblers. Yeah, so Max, I'm going to come to you. What did you think about Marcus Stoinis opening the bowling?
I was very surprised to see Marcus Stoinis opening the bowling. The first over went pretty well. I was surprised that they then gave him another over because I thought it was possible that might end up going for 20. But no, got the key wicket. Turned out to be a masterstroke. If you touch it and it turns to gold, who's to question you?
So that was one part of their strategy. The other strategy, so I'm just going to cover Delhi Capitals here, but around picking Steve Smith. Jack, we've kind of panned him, and on Twitter you definitely took some stick yesterday around going, why Steve Smith is not the answer to Delhi Capitals' problems. But actually, they picked him in a certain role there. Is that the right thing to do? Is that the wrong thing to do? What do we want our listeners to know?
So I had a problem with quite a few of the strategic choices, and I tweeted about Stoinis as well. I was watching the game for people who think we just make this all up and sometimes get lucky. I tweeted about that as well. I thought their selection in general was a bit weird. I didn't really understand why they went with 2 off spinners and not Axar Patel. That didn't make loads of sense to me. I can't really justify that. And I think Steve Smith doesn't make much sense either. So if we break that down a little bit more, obviously off spinners, they match up really well against left-handers. They're not so good against anyone else. It's not like Mumbai Indians have 8 left-handers or something like that. They're a reasonably well-balanced side. So when you pick 2 off spinners and you expect to bowl a lot of overs with those off spinners, you do open yourself up to a situation where one of them's just serving the ball up to someone like Kyron Pollard. As it turns out, they got away with that one, and the results, the result went for them, and the results of the two spinners were decent enough as well.
Well, it wasn't even decent enough, right? Amit Mishra absolutely was brilliant. So I think he's the leading wicket taker for Delhi in history. Like he is.
Amit Mishra's the leg spinner.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
So I'm talking about specifically the off spinners in this selection point, and
sorry.
then the Steve Smith one as well. So I guess the logic behind it is that he will be good on a turning wicket. Because he's Steve Smith and he's a good batter. And that would be absolutely true if they were playing a test match, but they aren't, or they weren't rather. In T20 cricket, Steve Smith, who is actually quite a slow batsman in the first place, scores even slower against spin bowling. It's not a data-driven decision. That's just, Steve Smith looks good in the nets against spin. We've seen him score like 150 at Pune a few years ago in a test match. Like probably he'll be great here, but there's no evidence for that. So I thought Delhi lined up with a kind of a weird side overall. Look, the result works out for them. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think probably the decision making there was a bit lackluster, and I think if you repeat bad decisions like picking Steve Smith in your side, you will eventually lose cricket matches.
So Max, I don't know if you agree with me, but I'm actually of the opinion that Delhi played this really well. I thought last year they got their tactics wrong against Mumbai Indians in all three times that they lost to them, and on this occasion I thought that they did well to mix up the approach. What do you think?
I think that they were a little bit lucky with how it went in the end. On the Steve Smith point, I'd say picking Steve Smith for this sort of game probably isn't that bad an idea, because you're very unlikely to need that higher strike rate, and he's sort of the kind of player that actually might be quite useful for a game like this, which it did sort of turn out to be the case. But having said that, he takes up an overseas slot when you have someone like Rahane in your team, so I don't think there's that much of a benefit of picking. I know Rahane's not played that well this year, but I don't think you're going to get that much more out of Steve Smith to use up an overseas slot when you have someone like Rahane that you could bring in. Ultimately, I think the picking Amit Mishra was the thing that swung this game. I think if Delhi were chasing another 10 runs, they might not have got there. I think they were a little lucky. When I say lucky, that Mishra took 4 wickets, so a lot of plaudits to him. But I think Mumbai, they lost that middle order collapse happened at sort of around like their 8th, 9th over, didn't it? And I think from me, what it looked like is that they were basically thinking, okay, we're getting towards the stage now where it's going to become really difficult to bat, so we need to cash in here. And they kind of fluffed their lines a bit, skied a couple which were straight to the fielders in the deep, and that ultimately left them with having to rebuild and not quite getting a score up to where they wanted it to be. And in reply, I think Delhi probably should have started a bit quicker, and I thought they were going to possibly fall to the same fate as Sunrisers have in recent games, in that they hadn't quite got enough on the board up front. But as it happened in the end, that was not to be the case, and I think Hetmeyer with a couple of lusty blows at the end was key to them making it over the line.
Well, thanks for that, Max. Jack, in terms of the Mumbai Indians lineup, so they've managed to get themselves across the line. Last year, their batting was unbelievable in the UAE. Here at Chennai, they've struggled a little bit to adapt. The bowling has got them out of jail a couple of times, isn't it? Is this going to be a case that we see them struggling for the next couple of games before they get to a more truer batting deck than Chennai?
Sorry, Ross, I was slightly distracted by the fact that it sounds like you're talking to us from next door there. But I guess to answer your question, this is obviously not the ideal ground to play the type of cricket that they want to play. And I think that they will probably improve as they move to Eden Gardens or wherever it is that they head on their merry travels next. I do overall think that a little bit. I actually think that what we're seeing from Mumbai is kind of their versatility to an extent. I think, over the 4 matches, what have we seen? We've seen them, win 2 quite close ones, lose 2 quite close ones, all while basically playing in the worst possible conditions they could play in. And it was, it's not unrealistic to think that they could actually be 4-0 here. They could have won all 4. I mean, it's similarly they could have lost, but I've been pretty impressed with them. I haven't seen anything. I think is where I'm going with this. I haven't seen anything that suggests to me that they shouldn't still be favourites to win the IPL as a whole.
Okay, fair enough. Well, in terms of Delhi's batting performance, we've kind of touched upon it, Max. I think you said right about Hetmeyer kind of adding in that extra juice. We need to talk about Darwan. Darwan is on a hot purple streak here, boys. That we said at the start they could hot purple. That's what if I wanted to. If I wanted
KKR.
He's looking brilliant, and he's batted in different ways, right? He's adapted his style and still hit runs at different places. Like that is a sign of a great batsman. We're lucky to be watching him right now, aren't we?
I mean, he's having the season of his life. Well, one of the seasons of his life. He's sort of done this before. Darwan, I think he is in that top category of batters, I think, or top category of opening batters in this tournament. He's probably, if we're being honest, a little bit unlucky to be Indian, because otherwise he'd be, touring the world as an opening batter in all formats. You'd think. As it is, he's nailed down the ODI spot, but it looks like when we saw him for one game in the T20 series against England, but it's unlikely, I think, that he'll get back in to the T20 side for the World Cup later in the year. I don't know. What more to say? It feels like every time we watch Delhi that we mention that he's.
We're watching Darwan.
We could ask whether we think that Shikhar Dhawan was 45 for 1 or 45 for 2 yesterday. I actually walked out the room for this. By the time I came back into the room, the game had moved on. Max, talk us through what you mean. There was I think he was a leading edge. He was trying to flick it into the leg side, caught leading edge, and it flew fairly sharply to Hardik Pandya, who thought he'd taken a really good sharp diving catch, and obviously it went upstairs. It was one of those where it wasn't. I don't think it was entirely clear whether the fingers were under the ball or not. There was it's that sort of case where the fingers go into the grass and they disappear, so you don't actually know whether the fingers are underneath the ball or not. So Hardik Pandya clearly seemed to think that he'd got it, but that's obviously not an indication. But it was a foreshortening of the camera classic third umpire review, where you just have to go, don't really know, I'll go with a soft signal. Unfortunately, I didn't see what the soft signal was, so I assume it was.
There's no soft signal for the IPL because of all the hoo-ha in the England versus India series. BCCI were just like, nah, we're not having that anymore, so they got rid of it. Anyway, so I think that wraps up. There's plenty of people asking, is Darwan sexy? Prasha, yes, pretty he sexy. Is. Yeah. We've also got a couple of questions from Ravi around Liam Livingstone has left because of the bio bubble. That's a blow to Rajasthan Royals. We thought he should be playing instead of David Miller, but not anymore, we'll see what happens there.
No,
I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Someone else now then.
Well, I was messaged by a guy called Gopal on Instagram earlier today, and it was talking about with the biosecure bubbles kind of being in place, and they're probably going to be in place for probably at least this IPL and probably the next IPL. Should there actually be some kind of loan system between bio bubbles? So actually, some of the backup players who aren't playing for some of the other franchises, could they be loaned to someone like Rajasthan Royals, who are in all kinds of bother at the moment with their overseas? Or is it just a case of waiting until the allotted time where you can swap players?
I think you kind of have to go in with the squad you've got, don't you?
You get a pretty big squad, don't you?
Yeah,
I think
you've got 8 overseas players.
If I'm in charge, if I'm in charge of a
not
franchise,
Rajasthan Royals anymore. They've got about 2.
If I'm if I'm Mumbai Indians and I've got a player that Rajasthan Royals are thinking would really help them, and they sneak into the playoffs, and then it comes to the final, and he produces a match-winning innings and takes the title away from me, I'm going to be feeling pretty stupid. So I don't know if franchises would even be in the sort of the mood to help people mid-tournament.
Well, you could. I mean, Punjab Kings have done a great job. I mean, they could loan out Moises Henriquez to Rajasthan and make them even worse. So
They could
always
do.
an option.
He's first team now.
Right, boys. We are literally ticking over at the hour mark about now. So should we end this show? We will be back on Friday. That's the next cricket podcast. Not tomorrow. Friday.
We are playing cricket tomorrow, lads. Don't worry. We'll tell you how we do.
Probably well.
Because you have a former grade cricketer in the team.
Yeah. Thank you.
Remember, not the podcast of Grey Cricketer, the establishment podcast of Grey Cricketer, an actual real park cricketer. Anyway, look, that's taken a tangent, hasn't it? You can find us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter. You should go and check out our sponsor, Woodstock Cricket. You should go to our Patreon and become a Patreon of us. Max can buy a new guitar. Or you can join our channel if you'd rather do that on YouTube. And if you've been enjoying this video and stuff, subscribe and tell all your friends because that's how growth happens. And we don't yet live in a post-growth world, so I've been
hoping to grow for the last 10 years.
Well, there we go. Well, thank you ever so much for all your super chats, all of your questions, all of your comments. If you're watching this video not in the live comments, then please leave your comments and we'll get back to you because Jack hasn't got a life. So let's wrap that up there, boys, and follow us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram.